They say lawyers know how to read people. But Richard Blackwell, one of Manhattan's most ruthless corporate attorneys, was about to learn he couldn't read the woman sleeping beside him for 7 years. He thought he was discarding a broke social worker to marry into power. He mocked her thrift store clothes. He ridiculed her bleeding heart career. He even demanded she pay his legal fees just to prove his dominance. But Richard made one fatal error. He never questioned why she never asked him for money. Stay tuned, because what happens when the judge opens the sealed financial disclosure isn't justice. It's a devastating lesson in arrogance that cost one man everything. His career, his reputation, and $38 billion he never knew existed. The wine cost more than Elena made in a week, and Richard Blackwell knew it. That's exactly why he'd chosen this restaurant. He didn't even glance at the menu as he ordered the 2015 Chateau Margaux, his voice carrying that particular tone of casual authority that made waiters scramble and junior associates sweat. Across the white linen tablecloth, Elena Morrison sat with her hands folded in her lap, wearing the same grey blazer she'd worn to family court hearings for the past 3 years. To anyone watching, and Richard had made sure people were watching, she looked exactly like what he'd been telling his colleagues she was: plain, earnest, and hopelessly out of her depth. "Let's not drag this out, Elena," Richard said, not bothering to wait for the sommelier to finish pouring. He took a sip, nodded his approval, then fixed her with the same cold stare he used on opposing counsel. "You know why we're here." Elena looked at him. 7 years of marriage, and she still remembered the night they'd met at a legal aid fundraiser, when he'd been a passionate public defender, with holes in his shoes and fire in his eyes. That man was gone. In his place sat someone who'd calculated exactly how much his time was worth per billable hour, and resented every minute that didn't appreciate in value. "I assume you're finally ready to discuss the separation," Elena said quietly. "Divorce," Richard corrected, the word sharp as a scalpel. "Let's use proper terminology. I'm a partner at Hoffman, Sterling and Associates now, Elena. I can't afford ambiguity." The door to the private dining room opened, and Elena's stomach dropped. A woman walked in, blonde, polished, wearing a dress that cost more than Elena's monthly rent. She was younger, maybe 28, with the kind of confident smile that came from never doubting your place in the world. "Sorry I'm late," the woman said, leaning down to kiss Richard's cheek with practiced familiarity. She extended a manicured hand toward Elena. "Vanessa Sterling. You must be Elena Sterling, as in the senior partner, as in Richard's ticket to the executive floor. Richard and I have been working closely on the Meridian acquisition," Vanessa continued, settling into the chair beside him with the ease of someone who belonged there. "He's told me so much about you. Your social work, was it?" The way she said social work made it sound like a quaint hobby, like collecting stamps or knitting. "Family advocacy," Elena said, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. "I work with children in the foster system." "How noble," Vanessa said, and there wasn't an ounce of sincerity in her voice. She turned to Richard, placing her hand over his on the table. "Darling, should we order? I'm starving, and we have the partnership dinner at 8. Elena watched Richard's face transform. With her he was ice. With Vanessa he became warm, animated, the man she'd fallen in love with a lifetime ago. "Elena," Richard said, pulling an envelope from his briefcase, "I've had my attorney draft a settlement proposal. I think you'll find it more than fair. He slid the document across the table. Elena opened it, her eyes scanning the legal language she'd learned to understand from years of advocating for her clients. The number at the bottom made her blink. $5,000. 5,000, Elena repeated, looking up at him. It's generous, Richard said, refilling his wine glass. Given that you contributed nothing to the marital estate. Your salary barely covered groceries. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, your student loans, your car insurance. Frankly, Elena, you've been a financial drain on me for years. A drain, Elena whispered. Let's be honest, Richard continued, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of a man who'd never lost an argument. You chose a career that pays nothing. You refuse to leverage your education. I offered to get you interviews at corporate foundations, 6-figure salaries, but you wanted to make a real difference. He actually made air quotes. Well, congratulations. You made a difference to a lot of kids who can't pay you anything. Vanessa laughed, a crystalline sound. Richard, you're terrible. But she was smiling. I'm practical, Richard said. Elena, sign the papers. Take the 5,000. It's more than you'd get in court. Washington is a community property state, but with a prenup and documentation of income disparity, you'd be lucky to walk away with your car. Elena set the papers down carefully. Her hands weren't shaking. That surprised her. I worked 2 jobs to pay your bar exam fees, Elena said quietly. I paid our rent the first year when no firm would hire you. I sat up with you for 72 hours straight, helping you prepare for the Callahan trial that made your career. And I'm grateful, Richard said, his voice dripping with condescension. That's why I'm offering you anything at all. But gratitude isn't a legal argument, Elena. Contribution is measured in dollars, and you contributed none. Richard's being kind, Vanessa added. Most men in his position would demand you pay his legal fees for wasting everyone's time. Richard's eyes lit up. Actually, that's not a bad idea. My retainer alone is $30,000. You did file the initial paperwork, Elena. That could be construed as initiating frivolous litigation. I filed because you asked me to move out, Elena said. I asked you to transition. Richard corrected. There's a difference. But if you want to make this difficult, I can make it very difficult. I know every family court judge in this city. I've donated to their campaigns. Who do you think they'll believe? A partner at one of the most prestigious firms in the country? Or a social worker who can't even afford a decent suit? He leaned forward, his voice dropping to the tone he used in depositions when he was moving in for the kill. Sign the papers, Elena. Take the money. Go find some non-profit director who thinks your passion is attractive. Find someone at your level. But don't. He pointed a finger at her. Don't try to fight me in court. You'll lose everything, including whatever dignity you have left. Eleanor stood up slowly. The room tilted slightly, or maybe that was just her world shifting on its axis. She picked up her worn canvas bag, the one Richard had once called embarrassingly shabby. I'll see you in court, Richard, she said. Richard laughed, actually laughed. With what lawyer? Legal aid? You should have asked me more questions, Elena said, her voice so quiet only he could hear it. 7 years, and you never once asked about my family, my background, my maiden name. Something flickered across Richard's face. Confusion, maybe a hint of unease. It won't matter, he said. You're nobody, Elena. You've always been nobody. Elena walked toward the door, then paused. She turned back one last time. Richard and Vanessa were already laughing about something, his hand on her knee. the two of them looking like the cover of a luxury lifestyle magazine. "You're right about one thing," Elena said. "This is going to be educational." She walked out of the restaurant and into the cold Manhattan evening. The doorman hailed her a cab. A yellow taxi, not the black car service Richard now used exclusively. As she slid into the worn-back seat, she pulled out her phone. One contact. She'd saved it years ago and never used it, hoping she'd never have to. Victoria Chen, Morrison Family Legal. Elena pressed call. The phone rang once. A crisp, professional voice answered. "Miss Morrison, we've been expecting your call." For the first time in 7 years, Elena smiled. Victoria Chen's office didn't look like a law firm. There were no glass walls, no minimalist furniture, no reception area with magazines fanned out like peacock feathers. Instead, Elena found herself standing in front of a century-old brownstone in the West Village, its facade identical to the residential buildings flanking it on either side. The only indication this wasn't someone's home was a small brass plate beside the door, weathered with age. Chen and Associates, Private Counsel. Elena pressed the buzzer. The door clicked open immediately, as if someone had been watching. Inside, the air smelled of old books and furniture polish. The hallway was narrow, lined with dark wood panelling, and portraits of men in Victorian-era suits who looked like they'd built railroads and banks, which Elena knew they had. Her great-great-grandfather stared down at her from one of the frames, his expression as severe as she remembered from childhood stories. "Miss Morrison." Victoria Chen appeared at the end of the hallway, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. She was wearing a perfectly tailored grey suit that probably cost more than Richard's monthly car payment, though she wore it with the ease of someone who never thought about such things. "It's been too long. 7 years, Elena said. 7 years, 4 months and 12 days, Victoria corrected, leading her into a study that looked like it had been transplanted from a British manor house. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a mahogany desk that could seat 12 for dinner, and windows overlooking a private garden. Not that anyone was counting. Eleanor sank into a leather chair that had probably cost more than her entire apartment's furniture combined. "My father sent you updates. Monthly," Victoria confirmed, settling behind the desk. "Your work with the foster care system, your marriage to Mr. Blackwell, your decision to maintain your anonymity." She said the last word carefully, like she was handling something fragile. "Your father respected your choices, even if he didn't always understand them. He wanted me to come back, take my place in the company. He wanted you to be happy," Victoria said gently. "There's a difference." She opened a folder, her expression hardening. "But I assume you're here because Mr. Blackwell has made happiness impossible. He wants a divorce. I know. He filed the petition 3 days ago." Victoria slid a document across the desk. "But that's not all he filed." Elena picked up the paper, her stomach tightening as she read. "Motion to compel payment of legal fees and court costs. Petitioner asserts that respondent initiated frivolous litigation without merit or financial means to proceed, causing unnecessary legal expense and emotional distress to petitioner." "He's suing me for his legal fees," Elena whispered. $30,000, Victoria said, her voice like ice. "Plus, he's claiming emotional distress damages of $50,000. He's arguing that you've been financially dependent on him throughout the marriage, that you have no assets, and that forcing him to defend against your baseless claims has caused him professional embarrassment and personal anguish." Elena set the paper down. Her hands were shaking now. "He thinks I can't afford to fight him. He thinks you're nobody," Victoria said quietly. "He's wrong on both counts." The older woman stood and walked to a wall panel that Elena had assumed was decorative. Victoria pressed it, and the panel slid aside, revealing a small private elevator. "There's something you need to see." They rode up in silence. When the doors opened, Elena stepped into a different world. The top floor was all glass and steel, a war room lined with monitors displaying real-time financial data from markets across the globe. Bloomberg terminals, Reuters feeds, stock tickers scrolling endless numbers. 3 assistants worked quietly at stations, barely glancing up as Victoria led Elena to a conference table. "The Morrison media empire," Victoria said, gesturing to the screens. "Your legacy." Elena had been avoiding this for 7 years. She'd left home at 25, right after finishing her master's in social work, determined to build a life that meant something beyond quarterly earnings reports. Her father, Thomas Morrison, had built the empire from a single newspaper in Ohio into a global media conglomerate. Newspapers, television networks, streaming platforms, publishing houses. 47 countries, millions of employees, billions in revenue. Current valuation, Victoria said, pulling up a spreadsheet, is $38 billion. That includes the recently acquired Asia-Pacific streaming division and the controlling stake in Meridian Publishing Group. Meridian, the company Richard was working on. Elena almost laughed. "Your father passed away 6 months ago," Victoria continued softly. "I'm sorry we couldn't attend the funeral publicly." "I was there," Elena said. "In the back, in sunglasses." She'd watched from a distance as hundreds of industry titans and politicians mourned a man they'd known as a media mogul. None of them had recognized the woman in the cheap black dress who slipped away before the reception. "His will was very clear," Victoria said. "Everything goes to you. The company, the assets, the trusts. It's been held in a blind trust pending your 30th birthday, which was last month," Elena finished. "I turned 30 last month." Victoria nodded. "Which means, as of 4 weeks ago, you became the sole heir and controlling shareholder of Morrison Media. You own newspapers that cover Richard's firm, television stations that report on corporate law, publishing houses that print the legal journals he reads every morning." She paused. "You could buy his law firm before lunch and shut it down before dinner." Elena walked to the window. Below, the city stretched out in all directions. Millions of people living lives that had nothing to do with media empires or billions of dollars. Down there, she was Elena Morrison, social worker, advocate for kids who had nothing. Up here, she was something else entirely. "Why didn't I tell him?" Elena asked. 7 years, Victoria. "Why didn't I just tell him who I was?" "Because you wanted to be loved for yourself," Victoria said gently. "Not for what you could give him. Not for the connections or the money or the power. You wanted someone to see you." "And he didn't," Elena whispered. "He never did." "No," Victoria agreed. "He saw a social worker with student loans and a Honda Civic. He saw someone he could discard when a better opportunity came along." Her voice hardened. "And now he's trying to humiliate you in court. He's demanding you pay him. He's calling you a financial drain and a burden." Elena turned back from the window. "What are my options?" "We can settle quietly," Victoria said. "I can have my team contact his attorney, reveal the assets, and this will disappear. He'll withdraw everything, probably beg for reconciliation, and you can walk away. Or," Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade, "or we can let him perform, Let him file every motion. Let him stand in front of a judge and explain exactly how worthless you are. Let him bring his new fiancée and his managing partner and every reporter he's invited to witness his victory. She leaned forward. And then we show them who you really are. Elena thought about the restaurant. Richard's voice dripping with contempt. Vanessa's laugh. The $5,000 he'd offered like he was doing her a favor. I want him to say it all, Elena said, her voice steady now. Every cruel thing he thinks about me, every assumption he's made. I want it on the record. It will destroy him, Victoria warned. His career, his reputation, his engagement. Once the managing partner realizes Richard is divorcing a Morrison, that he humiliated the woman who could buy their firm. Let him perform, Elena interrupted. I want everyone to see who he really is, and then I want them to see who I've always been. Victoria closed the folder. Then we have work to do. Discovery deadline is in 2 weeks. We'll file the financial disclosure at the last possible moment, sealed for the judge's eyes only until the hearing. And until then, Victoria said, you're still just Elena Morrison, broke social worker. Let him think he's winning. The fall will be so much harder. Elena looked at the screens again, at the empire she'd inherited, at the power she'd spent 7 years pretending didn't exist. She thought about the kids in her caseload, the ones who had nothing, who'd been told they were nothing. She knew exactly how that felt now. Let's begin, Elena said. The conference room smelled of leather and Richard's cologne, that expensive cedar and bergamot scent he'd started wearing after making partner. Elena sat in a chair that cost more than her monthly salary, facing 3 people who looked at her like she was something they'd scraped off their shoes. Gerald Hoffman was exactly what Elena had expected. Mid-50s, steel-grey hair, a suit that probably cost $8,000, and the kind of predatory smile that came from 30 years of making people cry in depositions. He was Richard's mentor, the attorney who'd taken him under his wing when he'd moved from public defense to corporate law. The man who taught him that compassion was a liability and that winning was the only metric that mattered. Let's begin, Hoffman said, not bothering with pleasantries. He opened a leather portfolio that matched the conference table. Mrs. Blackwell, you've refused our settlement offer of $5,000. You've indicated through your counsel. He glanced at the single sheet of paper Victoria had filed. Victoria Chen, who I've never heard of, that you intend to pursue equitable distribution of marital assets. That's correct, Elena said quietly. Then let's establish what you believe you're entitled to. Hoffman leaned back, making a show of getting comfortable. This was going to take a while, his posture suggested, because he was going to enjoy this. You were married to Mr. Blackwell for 7 years. During that time, what was your average annual income? $42,000, Elena said. And Mr. Blackwell's current income? I don't know exactly. $2.4 million annually. Hoffman interrupted. Not including bonuses, stock options, or his partnership stake in Hoffman, Sterling and Associates, which is valued at approximately $12 million. He let that number hang in the air. So, you made $42,000. He made $2.4 million. That's roughly 57 times your income. Do you consider that equitable contribution? Elena felt Victoria's hand on her arm under the table, a gentle pressure that meant stay calm. Let him dig. I contributed in other ways, Elena said. Did you? Hoffman shuffled his papers. Let's examine that. Did you pay the mortgage on the penthouse? No. The utilities? No. His car payments, the country club membership, the vacation home in the Hamptons? No. Did you pay for anything, Mrs. Blackwell? Elena's jaw tightened. I paid for groceries sometimes. I paid for... Sometimes, Hoffman repeated, smiling. You sometimes paid for groceries with your $42,000 salary while living in a penthouse that costs $35,000 a month. He looked at Richard, who was sitting beside him with the expression of someone watching a tennis match he'd already won. Let me ask you about assets. Do you own any real estate? No. Stocks, bonds, investment accounts? No. Any trust funds, inheritance, family money? Elena hesitated. This was it, the moment Victoria had prepared her for. I have some family holdings, she said carefully. Hoffman's eyes lit up. Family holdings? Please elaborate. Some property, art, personal items from my parents. Your parents, Hoffman said, leaning forward. And what did your parents do for a living? My father was in media, my mother was a philanthropist. Media? Hoffman repeated. So he worked for a newspaper, television station. He owned some media properties, Elena said. Richard laughed, actually laughed. Elena, stop being modest. Your dad ran a small-town newspaper in Ohio. It's hardly the New York Times. He looked at Hoffman. She's embarrassed about her working-class background. Always has been. Hoffman made a note. These family holdings, the property and art. What's their approximate value? I'm not sure exactly, Elena said. I haven't had them appraised recently. Ballpark, Hoffman pressed. Are we talking 10,000? 50,000? More than that, Elena said quietly. 100,000? Possibly more. Hoffman exchanged a glance with Richard. Mrs. Blackwell, I'm going to ask you directly. Do you possess any assets worth more than $500,000 that you haven't disclosed? Victoria's hand tightened on her arm. Elena met Hoffman's eyes. Yes, she said. The room went silent. Richard sat up straighter. Even Vanessa, who'd been scrolling through wedding Pinterest boards on her phone in the corner, looked up. I see, Hoffman said slowly. And why wasn't this disclosed in your initial financial statement? I was advised to provide a complete disclosure during the formal discovery period, Elena said, her voice steady. Which I will do. Hoffman's smile faded. Are we talking about a house, a condo your parents left you? Some real estate, yes, and other holdings. Other holdings, Hoffman repeated. Let me be very clear, Mrs. Blackwell. If you're hiding assets, if you're attempting to commit fraud in these proceedings, I will have you held in contempt so fast your head will spin. Do you understand me? I'm not hiding anything, Elena said. I'll provide full documentation when required by the court. Richard leaned over and whispered something to Hoffman. The attorney nodded, then looked at Elena with renewed contempt. Mr. Blackwell informs me that you once showed him some jewellery you claimed belonged to your mother. He said it looked like costume jewellery from a department store. Is that the kind of holding you're referring to? Elena thought about her mother's engagement ring, currently in a safe deposit box. A 12-carat Tiffany diamond that had belonged to the Astors. Her father had paid $4 million for it in 1985. Some of my mother's jewellery, yes, Elena said. Sentimental value, Hoffman said dismissively, making a note. Not actual value. Mrs. Blackwell, let me save us all some time. You're going to produce these family heirlooms. We're going to have them appraised. And they're going to be worth maybe $20,000 if you're lucky. That doesn't entitle you to millions in marital assets. Vanessa spoke up from the corner, her voice saccharine. Elena, honey, I don't want to be rude, but I saw pictures of you at your wedding. That dress was off the rack from David's bridal. If you had family money, Wouldn't you have worn something nicer? Elena looked at her. The younger woman was wearing a Chanel suit, this season's collection. Her engagement ring from Richard was a 3-carat emerald cut diamond that had probably cost him $50,000. She looked like money because she was money. Old Manhattan money. The Sterling family who'd been financing real estate developments since the 1920s. I preferred something simple, Elena said. Simple, Vanessa laughed. That's one word for it. She turned to Richard. Darling, didn't you say she does her grocery shopping at Costco? With coupons? Richard smiled. She did. Used to spend hours cutting them out of the Sunday paper. I always thought it was kind of sad, honestly. Like she was playing poor. I wasn't playing, Elena said quietly. No, Richard agreed, his voice turning cold. You were poor. You are poor. That's the reality, Elena. You come from nothing. You married up, way up, and you seemed to resent every second of it. You insisted on keeping your job, your apartment before we married, your little Toyota that was held together with duct tape and hope. He leaned forward. I tried to give you a better life. I tried to introduce you to people who could help your career. I offered to buy you decent clothes, a decent car. You refused everything. And now you want to take half of what I built? You didn't build it alone, Elena said. Name one thing, Richard snapped. Name one single thing you did that contributed to my career. Elena thought about the nights she'd edited his briefs when he was too tired to see straight. The times she'd hosted dinners for his clients when he was trying to make a partner. Cooking for hours because they couldn't afford to cater. The morning she'd driven him to the hospital when he had a panic attack before the biggest trial of his career and sat with him for 4 hours until he could breathe again. I was your wife, Elena said. And I'm paying you for your time, Richard said. $5,000, $700 per year of marriage. That's more than generous for someone who contributed nothing but emotional labor, which, Elena, isn't actually worth anything in a divorce court. Hoffman cleared his throat. Mrs. Blackwell, I'm going to be frank. You have no case. You have no assets. You have no standing to demand anything from my client. This is a waste of everyone's time. He pulled out a revised document. We're prepared to offer you one final settlement, $3,000, and you pay your own legal fees. Take it, or we'll see you in court, where a judge will laugh you out of the room. I'll see you in court, Elena said. Richard stood up, buttoning his jacket. You're making a mistake, Elena. A huge mistake. He walked around the table, stopping right beside her chair. Close enough that she had to look up at him. You know what's going to happen? I'm going to call every family court in this city, every legal aid organization, every non-profit that might hire a social worker with a grudge. By the time I'm done, you won't be able to get a job as a paralegal at a strip mall law office. He leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. I'm going to destroy you, Elena. Not because I hate you, because I can. Because that's what happens when nobody tries to fight somebody. You should have taken the money. He straightened up, smiled at Vanessa, and walked out. Hoffman packed his briefcase with leisurely precision, the victor savoring his win. Discovery deadline is in 2 weeks, he said to Victoria, who hadn't spoken once during the entire meeting. I expect a full financial disclosure. And Miss Chen, when it shows she has nothing, I'll be filing for sanctions against you for wasting the court's time. They left. Vanessa paused at the door, looking back at Elena with something almost like pity. You could have been smart about this, she said. Richard was willing to be generous. Now you're just going to be another cautionary tale about marrying out of your league. The door closed. The conference room was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. Victoria calmly closed her own folder and looked at Elena. "How do you feel?" she asked. Elena was shaking. Not with fear. With rage so pure it felt like electricity in her veins. "I want to watch him burn," she said. Victoria smiled. "Then let's give him matches." Richard invited the press. That was the first thing Elena noticed when she arrived at the courthouse. The cameras, the reporters with their microphones, the news vans parked along Center Street like they were covering a celebrity trial. She watched from across the street as Richard emerged from a black Mercedes, Vanessa on his arm, both of them dressed like they were attending a gala rather than a divorce hearing. "Mr. Blackwell, can you comment on today's proceedings?" a reporter called out. Richard paused as if he hadn't expected the question, though Eleanor could see he'd orchestrated this entire moment. He adjusted his tie. Her mess, she noticed, knew, and adopted an expression of weary determination. "I'm here today because I believe in protecting the integrity of our legal system," Richard said, his voice carrying that resonant quality he used in closing arguments. Frivolous divorce litigation has become an epidemic in this country. Opportunistic spouses targeting successful professionals, demanding money they didn't earn for marriages that were already failing. He shook his head sadly. "My ex-wife and I had an amicable separation. I offered her a generous settlement, but instead of accepting it with grace, she's chosen to drag this through the courts, costing taxpayers money and clogging up a system that should be serving people with legitimate grievances." "Are you saying her case has no merit?" another reporter asked. "I'm saying the facts will speak for themselves," Richard replied. "I built my career through hard work, through 18-hour days, and dedication to my clients. I won't apologize for my success. And I won't be punished for it by someone who contributed nothing to the marriage except—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Except their presence." Vanessa squeezed his arm supportively. She dressed for the cameras too. A conservative navy dress, minimal jewelry, her hair pulled back. The perfect future wife, standing by her man. "Mr. Blackwell, there are reports your ex-wife is a social worker. Do you think that's relevant to the case?" Richard's expression turned sympathetic, almost pitying. "Elena is a good person with a good heart. She chose a noble profession. But nobility doesn't pay the bills, and it doesn't entitle anyone to half of someone else's life's work. I hope that after today she can move on and find happiness at a level more suited to her means and expectations." He ushered Vanessa toward the courthouse steps. Elena watched them disappear through the doors, flanked by what looked like half of Hoffman, Sterling, and Associates. She recognized several senior partners from firm events Richard had dragged her to over the years. Events where she'd stood in the corner in her department store dresses, while Richard networked with men who owned summer homes in 3 countries. "Ready?" Victoria asked, appearing beside her. The older woman was carrying a single leather briefcase, looking almost casual compared to the army Richard had brought. "He's really doing this," Elena said. "He thinks he's untouchable," Victoria replied. "Men like Richard always do. They confuse winning with being right." She checked her watch. "The financial disclosure is filed and sealed. The clerk will deliver it to Judge Reeves exactly 10 minutes before the hearing begins. By the time Richard realizes what's happening, it will be too late to stop it." They crossed the street together. The reporters didn't notice Elena. She was wearing the same grey suit from the pre-trial conference, carrying a canvas bag, looking exactly like what Richard had called her, a nobody. She could have been a court reporter, a clerk, anyone. invisible. Inside, the courtroom was already packed. Elena felt her stomach drop when she saw who was there. The managing partner of Hoffman, Sterling and Associates, Gordon Sterling himself, Vanessa's father, sat in the front row like he was attending a coronation. He was a legend in corporate law, the man who'd built the firm from a 10-person operation into a powerhouse with offices in 12 cities. His presence was a statement. Richard Blackwell is family now. We protect our own. Beside him sat 3 other senior partners, all men Richard had courted for years. This wasn't just a divorce hearing for them. This was a show of force, a public demonstration that Richard was untouchable, that he had the backing of one of the most powerful law firms in the country. Vanessa sat directly behind Richard, her mother beside her. Another Sterling, another piece of the dynasty Richard was marrying into. They looked like they were attending a shareholder meeting, confident and bored. Elena took her seat at the respondents' table. Victoria arranged her papers with calm precision, seemingly unbothered by the crowd, the cameras at the back of the courtroom. The way every eye in the room dismissed Elena as already defeated. "Quite a turnout," Victoria murmured. "Richard really wants an audience for this." Gerald Hoffman was organizing what looked like 3 file boxes worth of evidence. He had 2 junior associates with him, both frantically preparing documents. This was overkill for a simple divorce case, Elena realized. This was an execution designed to be spectacular. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honourable Judge Patricia Reeves presiding." Judge Reeves swept into the courtroom, and Elena felt a small surge of relief. She'd done her research. Reeves was known for her no-nonsense approach, her intolerance for theatrics, and her particular disdain for attorneys who treated her courtroom like a stage. She was 63, had been on the bench for 27 years, and had a reputation for seeing through bullshit with surgical precision. The judge took her seat, surveying the packed courtroom with thinly veiled irritation. "This is a divorce hearing, not a circus," she said flatly. "Someone want to explain why there are news cameras in my courtroom?" Richard stood smoothly. "Your Honour, if I may, this case has broader implications for divorce law in this jurisdiction. The press has a legitimate interest in—" "The press can read the court transcript like everyone else," Judge Reeves interrupted. "Bailiff, clear the cameras, now." There was a commotion as the camera crews were ushered out, reporters protesting as they went. Judge Reeves waited until the doors closed before looking down at the docket. "Blackwell versus Blackwell," she read. "Mr. Hoffman, I understand you're representing the petitioner. I also understand you filed a motion for summary judgment, claiming the respondent has no standing to contest the original settlement offer. That's a bold strategy. Your Honour, the facts are clear," Hoffman said, standing. "My client offered a generous settlement. The respondent rejected it and is now wasting the court's time with frivolous demands for assets she has no legal claim to. And you've brought your entire law firm to watch you explain this?" Judge Reeves asked dryly, glancing at the senior partners in the gallery. "We believe in supporting our colleagues, Your Honour," Gordon Sterling said from his seat. "Mr. Blackwell is not just an attorney at our firm. He's family." Judge Reeves's expression didn't change. How touching. "Mr. Hoffman, proceed with your opening statement, and make it quick. I have 4 other cases on the docket today." Hoffman walked to the podium, and Elena watched him transform. This was his element, his arena. He destroyed opposing counsel in courtrooms across the country. He'd made CEOs weep and shareholders recant. He was a legal assassin, and Elena was his target. "Your Honor," Hoffman began, his voice filling the room, "we are here today because of a simple truth. Not all marriages are equal partnerships. Some spouses build empires. Others simply occupy space." He gestured toward Richard. "My client, Richard Blackwell, is a self-made success story. He came from a modest background, worked his way through law school, and through sheer determination and brilliance, became one of the most respected corporate attorneys in this city. He earns $2.4 million annually. He owns a partnership stake worth $12 million. He has built a life of achievement." Hoffman turned, looking directly at Elena. "The respondent, Elena Blackwell, is a social worker earning $42,000 per year. She lives in a modest apartment. She drives a 15-year-old Honda Civic. She has no investment accounts, no real estate holdings, no retirement savings beyond a basic 401k worth approximately $38,000. He paused. "She is, by any objective measure, financially unsophisticated and dependent. She married my client when he was still establishing his career, and she has spent 7 years living off his success while contributing nothing to the marital estate." Elena felt every eye in the courtroom on her. She kept her gaze straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap. "My client offered her $5,000. Hoffman continued. "A gift, really, since Washington law does not require him to give her anything, given the clear prenuptial agreement and the disparate contribution to marital assets. She rejected this offer and instead demanded equitable distribution, a legal euphemism for taking half of what she didn't earn." Gordon Sterling nodded approvingly from the gallery. Vanessa whispered something to her mother, both of them smiling. "Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of case that undermines public faith in our legal system. A spouse who contributed nothing attempting to profit from another's hard work. We ask the court to enforce the prenuptial agreement, deny the respondent's claims, and award my client his legal fees, which currently exceed $80,000. Hoffman returned to his seat. "The respondent is a professional victim, Your Honor, and professional victims should not be rewarded." Richard leaned back in his chair, the picture of vindication. Around the courtroom, the senior partners nodded. This was a massacre, and everyone knew it. Judge Reeves looked at Victoria. "Miss Chen, your opening statement?" Victoria stood slowly. She didn't walk to the podium. She simply stood at her table, one hand resting on her briefcase. "Your Honor," Victoria said quietly, "Mr. Hoffman has painted a compelling picture. He's described my client as financially unsophisticated, dependent, a burden on her ex-husband's success." She paused. "I wonder if he'll maintain that characterization after reviewing the sealed financial disclosure that was filed this morning." Judge Reeves glanced at the document on her bench, the one the clerk had delivered exactly 10 minutes before the hearing began. Hoffman frowned. "Your Honor, any financial disclosure should have been provided to opposing counsel during discovery. It was filed within the legal deadline," Victoria interrupted calmly. "And given the sensitive nature of the information, my client requested it be sealed until today's hearing." Judge Reeves opened the envelope. The courtroom fell silent. Elena watched the judge's face, watched her eyes scan the first page, watched her expression shift from professional detachment to surprise, to something that looked almost like shock. Judge Reeves looked up at Elena, then at Victoria, then back at the document. "Mr. Hoffman," the judge said slowly, "I suggest you approach the bench." Now, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Elena watched Gerald Hoffman approach the bench. his confident stride faltering slightly as he caught sight of Judge Reeves's expression. Whatever the judge was reading, it had transformed her face from professional irritation to something Elena couldn't quite identify. Shock. Disbelief. "Mr. Hoffman," Judge Reeves said, her voice carefully controlled, "have you reviewed the respondent's financial disclosure?" "No, Your Honor," Hoffman said, clearly annoyed. "As I mentioned, this should have been provided during— I suggest you review it now." The judge slid a copy across the bench. Hoffman picked up the document with the air of a man humouring an eccentric. Elena watched his eyes move across the first page. She'd memorized that page during her meeting with Victoria. She knew exactly what he was seeing. Confidential financial disclosure. Respondent, Elena Christine Morrison. Case No, 2024, DR 4892. Primary assets. Morrison Media Holdings, LLC. Sole beneficiary. Valuation. Certified by Deloitte Financial Advisory. December 2024. $38.2 billion. Hoffman stopped breathing. Elena could see it from across the courtroom. The way his chest went still, the way his hand holding the paper started to shake almost imperceptibly. This— Hoffman's voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this must be an error. Some kind of clerical mistake. The respondent is a social worker earning $42,000. Keep reading, Mr. Hoffman," Judge Reeves said. Hoffman turned the page. His face had gone from confident tan to a sickly grey. Real estate holdings partial list. Morrison Tower, Manhattan, 47-story headquarters, $890 million. Residential properties across 12 states, $340 million. Surrey Estate, England, ancestral home, 847 acres, $180 million. Controlling stake, Port Harbor Development, Seattle, $560 million. Media properties, Morrison Publishing Group, 47 newspapers, 6 magazines, North America, Pacific Broadcasting Network, 8 television stations, 4 streaming platforms, Morrison Digital Media, controlling stake in 23 online news outlets, Sterling Morrison International, joint venture, Europe, beach to Asia markets. Sterling Morrison, Hoffman whispered. He looked up at Gordon Sterling in the gallery, and Elena saw understanding dawn like a freight train hitting him. Sterling Morrison International. That's your— Gordon Sterling had gone completely white. He was staring at Elena like he was seeing a ghost. Beside him, the other senior partners were leaning in, trying to see what Hoffman was holding. Richard still didn't understand. He was looking between Hoffman and his mentor, clearly confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere. "Gerald, what is it? Is it a trust fund? How much are we talking?" Hoffman didn't answer. He was on the 3rd page now, and his hands were visibly shaking. Liquid assets. Investment portfolio. Diversified. D'Oeuvre. $2.4 billion. Cash reserves. $890 million. Bonds and securities. $1.7 billion. Estimated net worth. $38.2 billion USD. Status. Sole heir and controlling shareholder, Morrison Media Empire. Verification. Certified by Deloitte Financial Advisory, Goldman Sachs Private Wealth Management, and Swiss Banking Authority. At the bottom of the page, in small print, beneficiary identity protected under confidentiality agreement until trust maturation at age 30. November 2024. Your Honor, Hoffman said, and his voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. I need a moment to consult with my client. I imagine you do? Judge Reeves said dryly. She looked at Richard, who was still sitting at the petitioner's table, looking annoyed at the delay. Mr. Blackwell, I suggest you look at the document your attorney is holding. Hoffman walked back to the table like a man walking to his execution. He set the papers down in front of Richard. Elena watched her ex-husband's face as he read. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times in the past 2 weeks. But reality was so much better than fantasy. Richard's expression went through a remarkable transformation. Confusion, disbelief, understanding, horror. "The 38 billion, Richard whispered. That's a typo. That's not—" He looked up at Elena, and for the first time in 7 years, she saw fear in his eyes. Real, visceral fear. "Morrison Media, you're not. Elena, your father ran a small newspaper in Ohio. You told me he ran a small—" "I never told you that," Elena said quietly. "You assumed it. I just didn't correct you." In the gallery, Gordon Sterling stood up. His face had gone from white to red, and his hands were clenched at his sides. "Your Honor, may I approach?" "You may not," Judge Reeves said sharply. "Sit down, Mr. Sterling. This is not your case." "But, Your Honor, Morrison Media, we have business relationships with—" Sterling looked at Richard with barely controlled fury. "You told me she was nobody. You said she was a social worker from Ohio with no family money. I thought she was." Richard's voice had risen to something close to a shout. He was staring at the papers like they might burst into flames. "Elena, what is this? Is this real? How can this be real?" "It's verified by 3 separate financial institutions," Victoria said calmly from her table. She still hadn't moved, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't done anything except sit there with the slight smile of someone watching a carefully constructed house of cards collapse. "The documentation is extensive. My client is the sole heir to the Morrison Media empire, which, as Mr. Hoffman noted in his opening statement, makes her one of the wealthiest women in the world. Certainly wealthier than anyone in this courtroom." Vanessa had stood up, her phone in her hand, frantically typing. Elena knew what she was doing. Googling Morrison Media, searching for information about Thomas Morrison's daughter, trying to understand how this was possible. Her mother grabbed her arm, pulling her back down, but Vanessa's face had gone sheet white. "Your Honor," Hoffman said, trying to regain control of the situation. "This is highly unusual. The respondent never disclosed these assets during discovery. She never mentioned. She disclosed within the legal deadline." Victoria interrupted. "Washington State requires financial disclosure no later than 5 business days before the hearing. We filed exactly 5 business days ago. That you chose not to review the disclosure until this moment is not my client's problem." Judge Reeves leaned back in her chair, and Elena could swear she saw the hint of a smile at the corners of the judge's mouth. "Mr. Hoffman, 10 minutes ago you argued that the respondent is financially unsophisticated and dependent, that she contributed nothing to the marital estate, that she was, and I quote, a professional victim attempting to profit from her ex-husband's hard work. Would you like to revise those statements?" Hoffman opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Richard, who was still staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "The respondent," Hoffman said carefully, "appears to have significant assets that were not previously disclosed to my client during the marriage." "Not disclosed," Elena said, speaking up for the first time since the hearing began. Every head in the courtroom turned toward her. or not asked about, Mr. Hoffman. Your client spent 7 years married to me. 7 years! Did he ever once ask about my family? My background? Did he ever question why I never asked him for money? Why I was content living on my salary when he was spending thousands of dollars on watches and cars? Elena, Richard said, and his voice had changed completely. The contempt was gone, replaced by something desperate. Baby, I didn't know. How could I have known? You never told me. You never asked, Elena repeated. You saw a social worker and decided that's all I was. You assumed I came from nothing because I chose to live simply. Her voice hardened. You mocked me for it. You called me financially illiterate. You offered me $5,000 like you were doing charity work. The courtroom was dead silent. Every lawyer, every partner, every spectator was frozen, watching this moment unfold. Mr. Hoffman, Judge Reeves said, I believe you had a motion for summary judgment. Something about the respondent having no standing to contest your settlement offer? Hoffman looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. Your Honor, in light of this new information, we would like to request a recess to what? Judge Reeves asked. To reconsider your position now that you've discovered the respondent isn't poor. Mr. Hoffman, you spent 20 minutes explaining to this court why financial contribution is the only metric that matters in a marriage. You argued that the respondent contributed nothing and therefore deserves nothing. Are you now suggesting that her personal wealth changes the validity of that argument? Your Honor, we clearly need time to review. You had time, the judge interrupted. You had 5 business days to review the disclosure. You chose not to. That was a strategic error, Mr. Hoffman. A spectacular one. She looked at Richard. Mr. Blackwell, you filed a motion claiming your ex-wife owes you legal fees because she initiated frivolous litigation without merit. You described her as financially dependent and unsophisticated. You argued that forcing you to defend against her claims has caused you professional embarrassment and emotional distress. Do you still maintain those positions? Richard couldn't speak. He was staring at Elena like he'd never seen her before, like she was a stranger wearing his ex-wife's face. I didn't know, he finally said. I swear to God, Elena, I didn't know. Would it have mattered? Elena asked softly. If you'd known. The question hung in the air. Everyone in the courtroom knew the answer. If Richard had known Elena was worth $38 billion, he never would have divorced her. He would have stayed. He would have pretended to love her. He would have done whatever it took to keep access to that money, which meant he'd never loved her at all. Judge Reeves picked up her gavel. We're going to take a 15-minute recess. Mr. Hoffman, I suggest you use that time wisely, because when we reconvene, we're going to discuss exactly how this case proceeds in light of these revelations. She banged the gavel. Court is in recess.